Hello and welcome to another episode of The Rundown. I'm Sunny Galt. I'm a messenger with United Network News, and we are the official news channel for CARE, which you may have heard of that before. It stands for the Center for Amity and Restoration of Earth. It's a really big task that CARE has to not only inform people, but to also move us into where our planet is going, which is going to look very different from where it currently is. So UNN is a branch, if you will, of CARE, and through UNN, we discuss the real news, what's really happening on our planet, and what's also happening elsewhere that is impacting our planet as well as us impacting other places. We'll talk more about that today when we talk about Earth being a keystone planet. But if you want to learn more about our newscast and some of the other shows that we put out, you can head on over to unitednetwork.earth. We have a newscast that comes out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And this podcast is basically a week in review. So I take the stories that we've covered over the last week on UNN, and I provide some summaries for you guys. And this is a great opportunity if you missed one of those newscasts, because the newscast can be 2 hours long, maybe even 3 hours long, depending on if it's a really busy news day, if you will. And sometimes it's hard to keep up with all of that, right? So this is kind of the Cliff Notes version. We will include some sound bites when we get to the World Situation Report. Other than that, I'm doing a quick roundup of some of these stories. And this is also a great way, by the way, if you want to share UNN with somebody, we do have our content available outside of our website. So anything that's on unitednetwork.earth is mainly for our members. We do have some free content up there, but you do need to be a member to get our newscasts right away. The newscasts also are distributed on YouTube and Rumble 1 week after their original air date or release date on our app. But these podcast episodes are nice because this weekly roundup episode comes out usually before people would be able to see the content for free on YouTube and Rumble. So it kind of serves as a preview. So it's a great way to share UNN with people who may have never heard of us before, which there are still a lot of people that haven't heard of us before. So we really appreciate it when you do share this content. I know some of the stuff we talk about seems a little bit out there for the average person, but we do need to share this information as much as possible. So it's less and less strange to people because this stuff really is happening, and most people have no idea of the realities of what's happening on our planet. They just know that something's a little bit off. More and more people are starting to wake up to that fact, but it's really hard, when you've got messages coming at you, whether it's social media, mainstream media, alternative media. I mean, their narrative of, what the powers that be want you to think, it's everywhere. Right? You really can't get away from it until you realize what's really going on. And then it's really easy to see their plan. I mean, I can see it a million miles away now. I'm like, oh, I see what you're doing with that article. I see what you're doing with that news headline. Yeah, not going to fall for it. And you learn a lot of those skills by listening and watching UNN because we tell you what's really happening. We show you how to kind of discern the truth between all of their lies and narratives that they're putting out there. We always encourage you guys to think critically and to ask questions because we're all learning, right? Nobody knows everything. And we're trying to put all these different pieces together and make sense for us so we can move forward with our planet, so we can have the world that we've always dreamed of. I know for a lot of people that seems like a pipe dream, but it's not. It's here. And we have to apply ourselves and take that next step, because without humanity, like rolling up their sleeves and getting their hands dirty, this doesn't happen. And so we need you guys. You guys, our boots on the ground, so to speak, to go out there and share the message as much as possible. Okay, I don't have a ton of announcements for you guys, so let's just hop right into the coming up. I want to give you guys an overview of what we're going to be discussing so you guys can kind of follow along as we're discussing. what's coming up on the show. So for our field messenger reports, we have reports coming in this week from Uganda, Canada, United States, and Romania. So we'll talk about briefly those stories because they are definitely more visual stories. But if you want to go back and watch a certain newscast to see a certain story, I want to give you a heads up on what to expect. We also have stories we call New Earth, which is about where our planet is going. We talk about our awesome superhuman skills that have laid dormant for a long time that we're now all learning more about and learning how to use. We've also got some stories to encourage and inspire you of people that are making huge changes in their community to help the environment, just to help humanity in general. So we'll share some of those stories. We've got general regional news. You may hear some of these headlines out and about, various news sources. We group things together according to continent so you can kind of know what's happening around the world, what the official narrative is, and then if there's, the truth behind it, we'll give you that as well. And then we have our world situation report, and that's with Kimberly Gogan from the Office of the Guardian. This week, we had to break down a lot of rumors that were going around. There's like a mainstream narrative, for example, about the Iranian president and the helicopter crash. And a lot of people are scratching their heads going, what is really going on over there? So we're going to shed some light on that. We're also going to learn more about our planet and the battle between good and evil and who the characters are in this big battle, which I guarantee you haven't heard before. And some other rumors here and there that we've got to clean up from alternative media. So that is the rundown for what is coming up. Let's hop to it. Today is May 25th, 2024. Here is the rundown of stories you may have missed this week on UNN. Okay, let's kick things off with our field messenger reports. Our field messengers are the heart and soul of what United Network News is all about. We believe you guys reporting on stories that are happening in your area is the future of news. We say that you guys are the face of news, and that's to get away from these crazy narratives that the deep state and others that think they control the planet are trying to spread to everyone. Well, if everyone is out there sharing their own stories, the deep state doesn't have a chance, okay? They don't have the ability to pull the wool over everyone's eyes if we have our cell phones in our hands and can say, that's what they're saying, but let me show you what's happening in our backyard. So this is us starting to share our own stories. And some of the stories are more newsy and some of them are more community-based, but it's still beautiful because we're here to get to know each other again. Again, put all these narratives aside. We all have ideas of what someone in whatever country is like. And a lot of those are not really accurate. So let's watch each other's stories and get to know each other a little bit better, to know the truth, right? So let's start with Monday. We've got two stories, two field messenger reports on Monday. The first one comes from Diane in Uganda. And she tells us about a company called Airtel that is a mobile money provider for Ugandans. So this is an interesting way for residents to essentially bypass a bank, which may be really important for us in the near future. So through Airtel, money can be added through your phone. So people bring their phone, and in the video, she shows us like a cart by the side of the road with someone manning it, of course, to help the people. But they can add money to the phone and they can buy airtime for their phone, data, things like that. But you can also use it kind of like a credit card, if you will, to be able to purchase other services. That could be food for your family. That could be a service that you need to have done, for your car or for your home or something like that. And the reason why this story is so important is because if you've been listening to us for a while, you know that there is something set up called the Global Repository Fund. And this is money for humanity to rebuild our planet. And there's a lot of people out there that have ideas for projects to be able to help their communities. And some of it is, involving bringing clean drinking water to their communities. Maybe you have an idea of helping people in a different way, maybe with elderly people or something like that. There's going to be so many different types of projects, but we have to be able to get the money to the people. So this is why a story like this and us reporting on this is so important. At this point, we don't know what kind of support we're going to have for the banks, because if you guys have been in this alternative comedia, it kind of is a comedy, isn't it? That's a combination of comedy and media. No, it's not a comedia. If you have been listening to alternative media for a while, you have heard about the bankers that want to control everything. Well, it's not just about the bankers. We learn a lot more, being part of the UNN team, of what's really going on behind the scenes. But you hear about these people that run these banks, and they would like to continue running them and doing nefarious things behind the scenes. And so we don't know what kind of support we're going to have yet through the banks. It may just be ATMs or places like this, places like Airtel, to be able to get the money to the people. So thank you, Diane, for that story, because it gives us some ideas of other ways that we can help the people. How can we get funding to the people if we don't have the support that we would typically have? And then also on Monday, Steve from Canada has a story for us. He reported on a local fire in his area. So he actually shows this video of the fire kind of coming down, and there's a bunch of smoke, things like that. It is spreading. I believe he said the area that the fire is covering, at least at the time of his reporting, was about 30,000 acres, which is 10 hectares, I believe he said. So again, this is more of a local story, him sharing what's going on in the area. He showed us a map and everything. So thank you, Steve, for that update. And then on Wednesday, we have a couple stories. So Mike from the United States, he actually lives in Louisiana. He does a story about wild blackberries. I love blackberries. I remember as a kid, I had a couple relatives that lived kind of in the country. It was my great uncle and my great aunt, and they lived very close to each other. And I remember between their homes, there were all these beautiful wild blackberries. And this kind of ties into Mike's story, because he talks about the berries being in full season. They're ready for picking. And it just reminded me of my childhood, just like going and picking raspberries, or not. Well, it wasn't just blackberries. There were raspberries and other berries as well. But just picking it off the vine or, off the bush and just eating it. And Mike also gives us a little bit of the history behind this and how these blackberries got to Louisiana. They are actually a very hardy fruit. They can thrive in many conditions. It's used for food as well as medicine. So gives us a little bit of history on all that. All right. Second story on Wednesday is from Monica in Romania. And she takes us and shows us the site of what we're calling the Zeolite Mountain. It's actually a group of large hills in Romania. And it's kind of they're nestled in this forest, okay? But this is these hills are a result of volcanic ash from a prehistoric volcanic eruption. And Monica's whole story is about, obviously, volcanoes. That is unless it's triggered somehow, but it's usually a natural occurrence, right? And so how the earth operates is you might have some destruction, but then the earth heals itself. And so Monica's report is about how this volcanic ash turns into these hills. And what it's made out of then is this volcanic tuff and something called zeolite. And she talks about all the benefits of this combination and how it helps the local ecosystem. So it's just a beautiful story of how the earth takes care of itself, right? And revitalizes itself. And then on Friday, we have a couple stories. The first one is from Keith in Canada. He introduces us to something called kick sledding. So this kind of looks like a sled on skis with a chair. If you can picture that, maybe you should type something into a search engine and you'll come up with some interesting visuals there. But he takes this out on this frozen lake. It's called Lake Marion. It's in Ontario, Canada. And it's beautiful. It's right as the sun is coming up, and we get to meet some of his dogs. And he just shares a little bit about his life and how he likes to go out there and do kick sledding and just enjoy nature. It's really pretty. And then Claudia in the United States, she's in Tennessee. She introduces us to circle dancing. I think she said she traveled about 3 hours to find a group of people that were practicing circle dancing. So she traveled a little bit for her story. Thank you, Claudia. But circle dancing is a meditative and spiritual dance. And it usually involves people holding hands in some capacity and doing something somewhat in unison, right? It's not like it's choreographed necessarily, but this is a way for people to reconnect with the planet, reconnect with Mother Earth, and just be very appreciative for nature and their surroundings. All right, let's talk about the new Earth. In this segment of our news, it's a combination of interviews as well as inspirational stories to help motivate you guys and perhaps provide some new information that you weren't aware of or may have forgotten about our planet and how amazing it is. So for the interview portion, let's quickly go through these. We do one in each newscast. On Monday, I interviewed Zenka Caro. She is from a company, a business in Sedona, Arizona called LightNet. And you guys should really check it out, especially if you want to start implementing some of your amazing new superhuman gifts that you're learning about. If you want some practice with other people, like spoon bending, we've covered so many topics with Zenka. Well, check them out because they do online Zoom sessions. They also do stuff in person, but not everyone's in Arizona. But I love this group. And Zenka shares with us, it's a story that might be a little bit out there for some people, depending on your background and what your level of awareness is. But she tells us how to call a UFO. And I know for some people, they're going to be like, no way, I don't want to have anything to do with that. But this is actually possible. She has done this with various groups. And she takes us through what they do. And it could look different for you. There's not just one way to do this, I'm sure. But if you are interested in making that kind of connection, and I'm not going to say that the moment you do this, some sort of unidentified flying object is going to come over your head and a beam is going to shine down and beam me up, Scotty, kind of thing. I'm not saying that's going to happen. But if you want to start making these connections with benevolent beings, this is a good segment to kind of check out. Just expand your mind a little bit. Okay, and then on Wednesday, we had Lee Degani on the news. She is a spiritual counselor. She and her husband work a lot with children, which is what most of our segments with her focus on because I'm a mom. I've got 4 younger kids. Actually, my oldest is going into high school next year. I can't believe that. I'm so used to saying younger kids. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know if they're really all young anymore. But I love talking to people about the children of the new earth because they were sent here for a reason. They are very special. They have different abilities, and they're here to help us through this whole transition. And so this segment that I do with Lee, we did it on Wednesday, is about how our energy as parents, as caregivers, as adults greatly impacts the children. And she gave this really interesting example, and you'll have to hear her tell the whole story. But she was doing some, I believe she said blindfold reading? You know how a lot of you guys have heard that children can read blindfolded, which is, again, one of our amazing superhuman gifts. Adults can do it too. It's just we've got more baggage to work through. We've got more life experiences that told us we can't do it. So it's usually easier for kids to be able to remember how to read blindfolded. And she said there was this time where she had a group of twins, and she and her husband were both teaching these kids at the same time. And her husband thought he had one twin when he really had the other twin. And one twin was a little bit more, let's just say advanced, a little bit more confident in being able to do this reading blindfolded. And he thought he had that twin, but he actually had the other twin. And it was the energy, like he was just expecting her to be able to read blindfolded. And there was kind of this mix-up unintentionally. And as a result, he didn't even realize he was putting off this kind of vibe saying, I don't know if you're going to be able to do this, but unintentionally that was happening. Well, when he thought it was the twin that really knew how to do this well, he put off a totally different vibe and the child read. So it's just an example of how we can unintentionally inhibit our children just by our expectations. She had a couple other really good examples too, so you guys will have to check out that segment. Then on Friday, we talk with Michelle Ann Phillips, and she is a theta healing practitioner. We've done a bunch of segments on theta, and that is how we connect with our creator. It has to do with your brainwave. And if you go into theta, which is a brainwave experience, then that connection can happen. And a lot of times we don't even really know we're doing it. We're just now starting to put names to these experiences that people have had, since the beginning of time, basically. And Michelle tells us about how to use theta along with meditation and visualization to really enhance those experiences. So those are our interviews. And then we have a couple stories. We usually have about 3 stories in each newscast. So I'm just going to highlight a few stories that we covered throughout the week. The first one is about diaper-free babies. Wouldn't it be nice, guys, if you didn't have to diaper your kids anymore? I can't even tell you how many diapers we went through. Me, especially having a set of twins. There were a lot of diapers for a period of time. So I reported on this. This was a while ago before I was working on UNN. I was doing a lot of parenting podcasts, and I have covered this before. It's something called elimination communication, and it's kind of just a fun phrase to say or term to say. But what this is it allows parents and caregivers an opportunity to respond to their child's elimination needs without the use of diapers. So again, like I said, wouldn't it be nice if you didn't have to have diapers for your kids? Now, a lot of people think of this and are like, oh my gosh, that would be so messy. And is that even sanitary? I mean, that was what I first thought of years ago. I mean, I probably heard about this maybe 15 years ago. And I was like, that sounds a little crazy. But now that I'm more awake and aware, it makes perfect sense. So why are we training our kids to just sit and poop and pee in their diapers? Sorry, I know that's a little gross, but essentially that's what we're doing. Why can't we believe in our children a little bit more about our kids' natural instincts? Why are we training them to be in diapers and then training them to use the toilet? Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Let's give our kids a little bit more credit. I feel like this goes into what we were talking about in those segments with Lee Degani about how amazing our kids are. Don't think that your kid can't do stuff. Don't put, that kind of energy on your kid. Believe that they can. And maybe we can start skipping diapers altogether. Pretty amazing, right? All right. Another story we did was about how dogs can reduce stress, which is something that most dog owners, I think, would say is the case. In my house, sometimes she causes more stress. I'm going to be honest. No, I'm just kidding. Well, actually, that is true, but she gives us so much love, and my kids just adore our golden doodle, Sadie. And so this particular story is about a recent study in South Korea. And what they found is that spending time with dogs reduces stress. It also boosts your mood and your concentration. And this was an actual experiment. So these researchers observed increased brainwave activity that was specifically linked to people after they were playing with dogs, feeding dogs, massaging dogs. And what they found is that they were just a lot more relaxed and their brainwaves changed. So there's some real science behind this. And our final New Earth story is about finding affordable housing. And this is a story out of Los Angeles, California, where there is a lot of homelessness. There is a nonprofit organization called Brilliant Corners, and they have helped 900 people find affordable homes. And here's what they do. They target vacant residential units, and they convert them into safe havens for people needing homes. And this could be for a longer period of time, depending on how long a person needs a place. But what is so nice about this is you're helping both sides of the equation here. You're helping landlords fill empty properties. Maybe they've sat empty for a little bit of time, so the landlord isn't making any money on that, but they still have utilities perhaps and other things that they have to pay. And obviously, it's also giving people some stable housing. Now let's talk about our regional news. We cover a bunch of stories in each newscast, usually about 15 or so. So I'm just going to give you some highlights. What I've done is I have gone through the stories for the last week in all three newscasts, and I've lumped the stories together into themes. So we've got a few themes that kind of stood out to me throughout the week. We've got weather and natural occurrences. We've got internet and tech, and then children and families. So let's get going talking about the weather. In Europe, there have been heavy rains, a lot of storms in that area causing major flooding, and this is happening in northern Italy, France, and Germany. And then interestingly, in southern Italy, they are facing an unusual heat wave, and that's leading to water scarcity and agricultural issues. So that's some weather occurrences that have been happening over this last week. Also in India, authorities in India's capital have ordered schools to close early for the summer due to extreme heat. They say temperatures are hitting 47 degrees Celsius, which is the equivalent of 117 degrees Fahrenheit. And the extreme heat is also affecting voter turnout because they've got some elections going on in there. So big heat wave going on in India. Then in Chile, they are experiencing their coldest fall in more than 70 years. And they say this is due to a sudden cold front impacting parts of South America. Temperatures have broken records, reaching near freezing. They say this could be the coldest since the year 1950. And there has been snow, which has caused power outages in parts of Santiago. In the U.S., in Iowa, we had a big tornado come through here, cause significant damage, again, in Iowa. And there was a mandatory curfew put in place. The storm leveled homes, which, of course, is a horrible sight to see. It also impacted wind turbines. A lot of their wind turbines were toppled. Some even caught fire as a result. And this tornado came about a week after severe weather has hit the Midwest here in the United States, and they say it's now moving south, so we'll keep an eye on that. And then in Spain and Portugal, you may have seen something online about a comet going through the sky. Do you guys see this video? It's actually really pretty. If you haven't seen it yet, maybe you just want to type it into a search engine. But there was a comet fragment that lit up the skies over Spain and Portugal. And this happened last Saturday night. So a week from today is when this happened. And it created this beautiful blue hue across the sky. The European Space Agency shared this video. I believe it's the same one. They were originally calling it a meteor, and then they kind of changed it to comet. I'm actually not 100% sure the difference between the two. Maybe look that up. That's kind of interesting information. They say it was flying at 45 kilometers per second, which is 28 miles per second, and it burned up over the Atlantic. I think there's a lot of stuff like this happens. Maybe it doesn't make such a grand show in the sky, but we do have a lot of things that get burned up in our atmosphere. And of course, a lot of those videos went viral. I'm sure you can still find them online if you want to check it out. All right, let's talk about the internet and tech. So we ran a story talking about digital nomads. You guys know what a digital nomad is? That's when you have someone, usually for work purposes, that can work from wherever, and they really take advantage of that. So they could be in any country, and they kind of roam about, like a nomad would roam about, but they somehow are able to do that digitally. So this story was about corporate digital nomads and how globally this number is surging. So much that countries like Estonia, Barbados, and Costa Rica have created, I don't know if that's actually called this, but digital nomad visas to attract remote workers. And these aren't just freelance workers, they're salaried employees as well. And we also talked about there being some interesting tax challenges with this. Because remote workers, obviously, they can work from wherever. They trigger different tax liabilities by being in multiple places, and this could impact employees and employers. All right, next story is about Indonesia getting more internet coverage through Starlink. This just launched. There are now millions of people in Indonesia, especially in those remote islands, that now have internet access through the launch of Starlink in their area. They had this launch event that took place, and I believe it was in Bali. And this is a big deal for them because their current internet providers weren't able to cover a lot of these remote areas. Obviously, when you have access to the internet, that can help in various ways for schools, for their economy, for businesses, all of that kind of stuff. So it's an exciting time for people in Indonesia. And they are hoping to get further out into other areas nearby to Indonesia. Then we also ran a story about social media posts in China and how they are being censored. So this is interesting. And this has to do with socialism, of course, but Chinese social media platforms are cracking down right now on posts that are focused on personal wealth and financial extravagance. Okay, so if people are kind of bragging about their personal wealth, showing a little bit of their bling bling, maybe some of their fancy cars, and bragging about that kind of lifestyle, they are removing these posts. Yeah, they don't want you to see all of that stuff. Apparently, everybody's the same. Everyone gets the same thing. That's what socialism is. And they don't want people boasting about that and the freedom that comes with being rich. Not that being rich is what it's all about, but it is nice to, not be in lack, right? We know now our planet, we are switching things up. We are going from a time of living in lack to a time of living in abundance. Abundance does not necessarily mean you're going to get a ton of cash. There are a lot of ways to be happy and be abundant that have nothing to do with dollars in your pocket. But it's just interesting what China is doing there. It's like, I feel like they don't want anybody to be happy over there. Everyone's got to have the same thing for everybody. Okay, our last topic that we're going to talk about in these regional stories is about children and family. So I've got a handful of stories for you guys. The first one, all right, I'm not going to lie. This story is really frustrating for me. This is about Germany's parliament and how they have amended their criminal code to lower penalties regarding child pornography. So this has to do with the possession, acquisition, dissemination of child pornography. And it means the possession will carry a minimum of 3 months in prison, and distribution will have a minimum of 6 months. So they are reducing the amount of time for committing these crimes. What they're claiming is that this offers more quote unquote flexibility with juvenile offenders, so they're not throwing the book at them right away. They also claim that this protects parents and teachers who report this stuff to authorities after discovering the material. I'm going to be honest with you guys. This story reeks to me like high heaven. I don't believe anything Germany is saying about this. I don't believe we should be lenient on anything regarding child pornography. So I can't imagine that because a parent or teacher finds it and reports that they're somehow getting in trouble. This is not making a lot of sense to me. So this was a very frustrating story. And not just for me. This has caused widespread concern and condemnation on social media. I'm sure if you did a quick search for it, you're going to find a bunch of stuff. So there you go. Not happy about that one. In Japan, Japan's parliament has revised its civil code to allow divorced parents the option of joint child custody by the year 2026. This is actually the first change to custody rights in Japan in nearly 80 years. And what this allows parents to do is file for either dual or single custody, whereas the current law only grants custody to one parent, and it's usually the mother. So it just gives them more options to be able to have the kids be able to, be with both sets of parents. All right. In the U.S., several states in the U.S. are seeing legislative efforts to reform the federal benefits for foster care children. Currently, about 40,000 to 80,000 foster children receive Social Security benefits due to a parent's death or their own disability. And what's happening now is these funds are typically used by the states to pay for foster care expenses. And what a lot of people want changed is they don't want it to go to the state. They want the funding to go to the children to help care for them and also provide for their future. All right, we've got another story out of Germany. Germany's parliament has been busy recently. So they have approved a reform to relax restrictions on family names. And they say this could be effective starting in May of 2025. Currently, parents can only give children one parent's surname, and only one partner can add the other's name. According to this reform, both partners and their children can now take double-barreled surnames with or without a hyphen. It also allows stepchildren and children of divorced parents to change their family names a little bit more easily. And our final story is focused here in the U.S. We've got a couple states. Tennessee and Delaware are now offering free diapers to families, and this is all being done through Medicaid. Tennessee is offering 100 diapers monthly for children under 2, and that starts in August, so only a few months away. And Delaware is offering 80 diapers a week, along with a pack of wipes, for the first 3 months after birth. I always think it's a good idea to help new parents as much as possible. I'm hoping to see some changes in the future to really help moms after having babies, because a lot of times there's not a lot of care for moms that are immediate postpartum. So I view stories like this as a step in the right direction. Now let's talk about what we discussed this week in the World Situation Report. So Kimberly Gogan from the Office of the Guardian, she was on the news for all 3 days that we had our newscast this week. And the first story we're going to focus on, we talked about on Monday, and we're basically going to squash some rumors that are going around in mainstream media and alternative media. And I'm sure you guys have seen the headlines about the death of the Iranian president and some of his staff, and this was all part of this helicopter crash. You may have seen some of the images of the alleged helicopter crash. Well, we tell you guys this all the time, but these stories that they craft are rarely true, or the reasoning behind something happening is rarely true. Now, in this case, the Iranian president was not in a helicopter crash, despite all the images that you might be seeing online. And if you were following this story in real time, you probably knew something was up, because they could not get their you-know-what together on this story. I don't know who was running narrative on this, but it was a mess. Even people in the media were kind of scratching their heads like, how do you not have this information? So let's talk about what really happened, because this is part of a much larger plan that's going on behind the scenes. And you know their plans always fail, but we still like to tell you guys what is happening, because they're always nefarious, and it's important for you guys to know what's really happening on our planet. So let's talk about it. Here's Kim.
As you know, I'm sure you've heard, unless you've been hiding in nature all weekend, that there was an alleged helicopter crash which killed the Iranian president and some members of his staff.
Yeah.
What is to come in the near future, this is according to mainstream news, is that Khamenei, which is the imam of the Shias and in charge of the Shias, is that he is going to select an interim president that will serve for 50 days until an election can be had to select another president. And of course, everywhere is a selection, and Iran is no exception.
Right.
But let me tell you about this alleged helicopter crash. Now, during the time of the alleged crash, they said the weather was bad, therefore they couldn't actually locate the helicopter. Mm-hmm. They tried to locate the helicopter allegedly by air, and then when they were unsuccessful due to fog and bad weather, which there was some bad weather, then they had tried to locate it up by ground and sent some ambulances to where they believed the crash occurred. Now, this was so haphazard. whoever was running this show, clearly it's their first day, because first they could find them, then they couldn't find them, and then so-and-so was on board, and then they're not on board, and we're not sure who's on board and who's on first, what's on second. And it was this game they played, for several days over the weekend, or a couple of days over the weekend, I should say. And finally they made a decision that they found the plane and that the president had passed away within the last several hours. I mean, it's been within the last 24 hours they made this decision. Right. Now, the president of Iran is not dead. Neither are his staff. They were located this morning in Belize. And I'm sure they're enjoying the weather and the beaches there. It's beautiful there if you haven't been to Belize. And awaiting further instructions. They'll probably get a new life and all that comes with it, just like they did with Hitler and other folks. Yeah. But there's a reason behind this all happening now. Okay. So we have also talked about the fact that Khomeini and Iran has been heavily controlled by the Order of the Dragon. Matter of fact, the head of the Order of the Green Dragon is actually Khomeini. So he's been kind of put in charge over a lot of the affairs on behalf of the Rothschilds Order of the Dragon and Chinese Order of the Dragon for quite some time now. Now, we did talk about the fact that the real Khomeini is dead. We've talked about it several times, but that, Iran is no different than the U.S., where we just walk heads of state around with a mask on and call it a day. He has tripped up a few times with other heads of state in the region, not being able to confirm events that have happened in the past between heads of state privately, like whether it be a fishing trip or some other type of event that did not happen in the news that took place privately, which is no surprise that, not all masked men know all the answers to all the questions. And the president also was on board with this plan. Now, for the last couple of years, Iran and China have built a very strong relationship due to the fact that there was a plan, as you know, to transfer the world's power center over to China or to BRICS or whatever they called it, and to crash and burn the United States. Okay. So under this plan, China had full control, or the Li family of China, the Order of the Dragon, Golden Dragon, had full control over the country of Iran. In all of the sanctions you see and the fight between Israel and Iran is just one hand fighting with the other hand to achieve an ultimate outcome of control over the Middle East. Mm-hmm. Well, China has been going through a lot of problems lately. They do not have the money to complete this plan successfully. They are basically full-on bankrupt. And therefore, there was a little deal made within the last several days. And the deal that was made was that China would receive $5.5 trillion for the Order of the Dragon to give up control over Iran. And this is what the operatives came up with. So first, it was supposed to be the president, which done. Mm-hmm. The next allocated payment is allegedly due on Friday to China to give up full control. So if this had actually happened, or does actually happen, which it won't, because these people are crazy, then China would receive $5.5 trillion, and that would get them out of debt and get them back into at least a stable state. And then Khomeini would be the next to die, and there would be another person put in control as the imam of the Shias. Okay. Well, the parties putting this forward is a group known as, and we've talked about them before, the Pallavicini family, or whatever's left of them. The guy that's currently running it is fairly young. I don't even know if this guy's 40 years old. If so, then he's right about 40. And for the families, that's a pretty young age, which means that somebody got all excited with themselves being a member of this family and decided it's time for them to now take over and step up. So here's the deal that they made. And this is really bad. So they did get a hold of, with China, they ordered the Order of the Black Dragon to find the old Meiwa system keys to Omega. Now, she had been given by probably Satan himself or somebody down there, Lilith, somebody, these master keys, which would then allow her to control a lot of different systems. And as Omega pretty much has faded away, it gave very limited control and limited access to things in order for them, the Pallavicini family, to then try to take back control over all world systems. But they didn't know that. Now, over the course of the last several days, they have made $75.42 trillion in promises to various countries. That's a lot of money around the world.
Wow.
Now, that would include Russia, South Africa, and we'll talk about why here in just a few moments. The only country that was not slated to get any money is the United States. However, $56 billion was promised to Langley 5 U.S. operatives and some other SSP people, including the Q crew and the Trump operatives, to allow the United States to burn to the ground. Oh, yes. Now, if you do happen to follow the Q crew, you'll notice that they mentioned 24 hours before it happened, they put out there, Iran is out, Egypt is in, with some weird coded messages like they normally do, and then this happens the following day, which tells me that the Q crew and the Trump operatives and Team Trump agreed to take the money.
So that is an eye-opener for you. For anyone out there that is thinking that those people are anything having to do with the white hat, come on now. Come on. They want everything to crash. They want to take ownership of everything in the U.S. and be in control. That's what the whole thing is about. They could care less about the people. So again, this big plan for the Pallavicini family would actually give them 65% ownership of Earth. And then the Dragon family allegedly would have 35%. I have a hard time saying this with a straight face, you guys, because having ownership of Earth, like Earth is a celestial being, has a soul. Like nobody owns anything that is a celestial being that has a soul. I'm sorry. So this whole idea, I just want to shake these people sometime and be like, do you know this is an organic being? Do you know that nobody owns organic beings? It's not even a thing. But these people are so close-minded and obviously just not on the same wavelength at all. All right, let's move forward and talk about things that are happening and we discussed on Wednesday. So we had this full moon, not that you guys pay attention to that, because who does, except for the annoying deep state. There was a full moon on Thursday. This report came out on Wednesday, but we were talking about, hey, there's a full moon coming up on Thursday. And then we have this crazy Friday deadline when the Pallavicini family is supposed to give out all of this money. And so things were, a little quiet. People were just kind of in a holding pattern. There were a couple things that Kim mentioned that I thought were really interesting. So we, meaning the light side, recently acquired DARPA's voting system. It's a global system, their whole platform, which if you don't know, elections are not elections, guys. They are selections. You have never truly participated in an election the way you think you are. We all, at one point, I was a huge proponent of get the vote out, right? Do your civic duty and participate, and very patriotic. And it's not that I'm not patriotic now. I think everyone should be patriotic of their home countries or the places they live. You should love where you live. I think that's important. But this whole voting system has been rigged from the very beginning, because they have to have these puppets in place to do their bidding. They would never leave that just open. It either goes to one puppet or it goes to the other puppet. So the fact that we now have control of their voting system, which they have controlled forever, by the way, and manipulated forever. So I know when people hear control of voting, they think that's a bad thing. But wouldn't you rather the light side have control over this as opposed to the dark side? Which technically means, and I know a lot of people don't want to have governments, and I totally respect that. I'm actually on the side of let's not have any government at all. But if it comes to here in the U.S., we've got a national election for the president in November. And people are talking about this a lot. So if we get to the point where these people are still kicking and screaming coming November, what's actually going to be on the ballot? We actually, because we have control of this platform, we can put whoever we want on the ballot. We can also impact the voting results as well. If nothing else, than to throw everything off that they're saying. Because I don't know if you guys know this, but on election night, a lot of the media, especially like the TV companies and stuff, they are plugged into systems. So the stats of like numbers coming in for voting and things like that, all the graphics you see, the fancy graphics, it's part of a system, and they're all plugged into the same system. So if you have control of that system, their narrative may have been that, Trump's going to win again, and you have, you put whatever candidate on the ballot you want, and suddenly the numbers on their screen are reflecting something different. I could totally see this being a huge eye-opening experience for America and the world. So while I'm not a proponent of governments and voting in rigged systems, it's still a good thing that we have it as opposed to them having it. So I'm sure we'll talk about this in coming months as the election grows closer. What are we actually going to do with this? It could end up being kind of funny. In my mind, it's kind of funny. Like what appears on the screen is totally different than what the anchors are saying. I think that's hysterical. Wouldn't want it to happen to me, by the way. But for the deep state that are spreading their narratives, I think it's hysterical. All right. Also on Wednesday, and this is a soundbite that I'm going to play, we get a little bit more history of our planet, of Earth being a keystone planet, which means what happens here on Earth impacts the entire multiverse, which is why Earth is considered this big battleground between light and dark. And this shows up again and again in our religious texts, right? You've heard about this final battle between the light and the dark. That is playing out right now. So the soundbite that I'm going to play for you guys is a little bit more about the inhabitants of Earth, all the way from the very beginning, and the players now that are actually going back and forth. Part are on the dark side, part are on the light side, and part are neutral. And humans are mixed into this as well. So take a listen.
So we know that Earth itself is a keystone. Mm-hmm. It is a keystone for all of creation. And at one point in time, Earth is also a celestial unto itself. So there is a celestial representation of Earth because it is part of the natural source of all creation. Now, Earth's all that is creation keystone, as it is, has both a dark side, a neutral side, and a light side to it. Mm-hmm. And therefore, the humans, or even Earth's inhabitants per se, and this is why everybody's coming here all of a sudden, because the inhabitants of Earth can actually affect what is created by Earth's keystone as a keystone planet. So now it's making more sense to me. I thought, well, gee, all these people are coming to help us, finish this off. And isn't this great? But they're actually coming to finish it off for good and to hold the light so that all that is created by the keystone is more light than it is neutral or dark.
Oh, okay.
How was that for interesting?
Yeah. So they weren't just being nice.
I know. That would be really nice, isn't it? Well, things are changing anyway, but it makes more sense to me now as to why Earth-born humans are so powerful. Yeah. Now, once Earth was created, Earth was only inhabited by celestials. Now, these are not the original celestials of source. We could call them baby celestials, or how do I say it? Celestial juniors, celestial lights. Okay. Therefore, the humanity's base root was as a celestial or junior celestials. Mm-hmm. Using the keystone of Earth to create throughout the multiverse. Very interesting. Now, we've had the discussion before about Merovingians versus Melchizedeks. And we said that there's oftentimes 15,000 of each on the planet, and then we end up killing each other for whatever reason. We go against each other. Yeah. Well, since obviously Earth is not inhabited only by celestials anymore, both sides represent a dark side of celestials and a light side of celestials. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yep. Now, we also have what we call neutrals or supporters that could go either way. So we have neutral celestials as well on this planet. And the goal of both sides is to gain the neutrals on one side or the other.
Okay, so this is starting to make sense. So, for example, when you find them like marrying each other, is that like an example of let's bring a Melchizedek over to the Merovingian side and dominate kind of thing? So, like Princess Di.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's other ones. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
And then they spawn what you would call a neutral.
I see. So William is a neutral.
Yeah.
Prince William.
Yeah, he would be considered a neutral. That's why we said he could go either way.
Yep.
So kind of making more and more sense now, because if he supports the dark, agenda, or his father's agenda, right, which he would be forced to do should he take a public position, then, they've gained one on their side.
Okay.
So if we each had, say, 15,000 in the beginning, we each had 15,000 of each, then if someone swayed the 15,000 neutrals onto their side, then they would be more powerful in creating all that is of light or all that is of dark. Mm-hmm. See?
Right.
And I found that very, very interesting. Now, let's talk about the rest of humanity. So the rest of humanity has both in them, but they're not considered celestial humans. They're just basically considered organic life forms. And that means the organic life forms can go either way. They can be swayed and pulled either way, but they don't have as much creative power as a celestial does.
Okay.
They have a lot of power to co-create, that's for sure. And in their original form on this planet, you would consider them celestial-like beings.
Okay, so they were like light beings then, or no, not light beings?
They could be either. They could be any of the three.
Okay.
And that's why the other side is so fixated on bloodlines.
Oh, now, but I meant their actual shape. When I said light, I don't mean like light versus dark. I'm referring to like translucent.
Are the celestials translucent? Is that what you're asking? Or humans would be translucent?
Yeah, I think that's what I'm asking.
Okay. In the very beginning of creation,
Yeah.
almost all of creation was semi-translucent because it
Yeah.
wasn't actually taking shape and form as matter. So even the inhabitants of Earth at that time would have looked the same.
Right.
So if that's what you're referring to, like back in history, before the dark side was created or anti-source was created, we had a lot of celestials around. So they didn't have shape. They had somewhat of a shape because that can be manipulated through frequency, right? But the actual creation of matter was only started forming when we had light and dark.
Okay.
But now we have a different way, or Source has made another way to create matter out of only the light side, utilizing distance and some other things. So that being said, that's where we are now. So we don't necessarily need the dark to create anymore. Right. Now, what they were expecting on their side, their 15,000 or whatever they have left of those beings on their side, plus their human followers, so to speak, they were hoping that Marduk's plan would have saved them on their side, because there's really no hope of them recreating the order in the way that it was and having as much power and control over humans and Earth as they did, as they once did.
Yeah, that's definitely something that the deep state is having a hard time wrapping their head around, right? They think they are the chosen ones and, everything should be given to them. And they cannot imagine that things are now going a different way. It's like it's really difficult for them to understand that and to come to terms with that. Also on Wednesday, we talked more about Marduk. That's probably a title you guys have heard before. And by the way, it is a title. It's referred to as a person, but really it's just that person's title. And by the way, he was not a human, even though he did look human sometimes, depending on whatever his form was. But Kim does go more into Marduk and some of his plans to keep humanity from receiving that direct energy from God, from Source. So if you want to learn a little bit more about that, that's at the end of the newscast on Wednesday. Let's move on and just talk briefly about some things that we covered on Friday. I'm not going to play a soundbite, but I did want to update you on a couple different things. The first is, Kim is always clearing and, cleaning, finding different AI systems that were tied to like the Omega system, which was on the dark side. And then, she'll have to remove a bunch of things. She found another AI system. This was from Marduk, and this was called the KAG AI system, which we had a good laugh about this on the show. The reason that's funny is because KAG stands for Kimberly Ann Gogan. So Marduk, again, which is a title, this character that was kind of at the top of the pyramid for Earth for a long period of time, created this AI system and named it after Kim, poor thing. She's had so many different ways that the deep state has tried to control her. In this case, this AI system was supposed to transmute her energy, her essence, her consciousness to create keys for them that they could use to control the Alpha system, which is the system that is opposite of Omega. Even though Omega doesn't exist anymore, there's still some remnants that are being cleared out. But everything is now run on the Alpha system. So that is the positive system from Source. The base part of the platform is actually a ninth density where Source is, where God is. And it's an etheric system. Well, they did have Omega on the other side, but that's gone away. So the deep state was trying, they thought that they were going to get some sort of AI system back, perhaps this KAG system. They probably didn't even know what it was necessarily. But again, they're just looking for help wherever they can. But all remnants from that system have been removed. In fact, Kim said that Marduk didn't actually have a chance to finish it. So it never really ran properly. But I think he was just trying to do anything he could because he realized he couldn't control Kim and he was losing control of everything. And didn't really work out in his favor. But that AI system is gone. It was named after Kim. We also had to dispel some more rumors that are going around in mainstream media and the alternative media. We told you earlier about the whole helicopter crash with the Iranian president and the fact that he is just living life in Brazil right now, expecting to get a huge paycheck. Well, something similar is happening in Syria, and you may have seen some reports about the First Lady and her husband, the president, that they suddenly got sick out of nowhere. Not only are they sick, but they transported them to 2 different locations or places for treatment. And these are like serious illnesses. I think one of them's cancer, leukemia, I believe. And just came out of nowhere, no warning about this, no hint that anyone was sick. But apparently they are getting in on this whole power system that, they're trying to change the power structure in the Middle East. And the First Lady and the President are no exception. So they're trying to get control over Syria. They've promised these people a lot of money. And like Kim said earlier, they're not going to have this money. But right now, the First Lady and the President are headed to Belize too. I don't know. Maybe they're hanging out with the Iranian president because he's not dead. And the interesting thing is, and something that gives us a little bit of hope here is that people just really aren't buying this anymore. The operatives, the people they're like, how is this happening? How we're expected to believe this? Like, this came out of nowhere. And, if the First Lady and the President don't receive this money, what's going to happen then? Are they going to suddenly just pop back into public life? Oh, okay, we're done with leukemia. All better now. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the headlines. Are they just going to mysteriously recover just like they mysteriously got the disease? I don't know. We'll see. And one more thing that Kim covered that I wanted to give you guys a heads up on is that the EPA, so the Environmental Protection Agency here in the United States, they have been putting some feelers out there about possible cyber attacks on water facilities in the U.S. And of course, they're going to blame big bad boogeymen countries that, have nothing to do with this. But they are saying Russia, Iran, China, is where these attacks could come from. That's absolutely not true. If you don't already know this, the U.S. has been poisoning our water supply for a while now. We've reported on various things that they've done, and this is in addition to fluoride and all the other nasty stuff. This goes back to COVID and, just a whole bunch of nasty stuff they try to put in our water. The good news is Kim has now taken over the water system. So the light side now has the ability to control water systems in the United States. This is huge. This is huge. Not only do we now, we can prevent them from doing, their nasty stuff of putting stuff in the water, but we could actually reverse this and do positive things in the water. So to my knowledge, Kim hasn't done anything like that. Usually before, it's one thing to stop a program, but to change it and use it for the positive in some way usually requires like a sit down with source to organize this and make sure that indeed is the best thing to do. Right now, it's still about stopping what they're doing so they don't have any control over us, really. And so now we have control back over our water system. We'll see what happens in the future. People I know in the chat rooms have suggested to positively charge the water and do some things like that. I mean, we'll see. We'll see. Obviously, it will be for the betterment of humanity, whatever is decided. So that is the rundown, guys. Really appreciate you guys listening to this week's episode. As always, we encourage you guys, do your research, look up some of the things that I was talking about, verify things for yourself, always have an open mind. We talk about your cup being empty or at the very least, halfway full or something. So you may have some beliefs, but always allow more room for more information because it's coming at us fast, guys. And we've been lied about pretty much everything. And so we have to relearn. So it's important that you guys keep an open mind about this. Always think critically, always use your discernment. And if you like today's episode, I encourage you guys to share it with someone you care about. For more information about us, again, visit our website at unitednetwork.earth. If you become a member, that gives you on-demand access to all of our newscasts. You'll get the complete world situation reports. We also have some original series you may want to check out. And you can comment with us on the videos that are posted on our app. I'm in there. there. Kim is in there sometimes trying to answer questions. You can also follow us on social media because we've got a great social media team that creates clips of some of the highlights of the newscasts, and you can share that with your friends that way as well. So again, thanks for being part of today's show. This is The Rundown, and I'm Sunny Galt for United Network News, signing off.